Hello. I just wanted to make a quick video to talk about my first attempts at travel photography and the first time I ever went away with to somewhere new with my camera, because I realised since I started this channel, although I've spoke a little bit about like me quitting my job and my reasons for that and the journey that I'm wanting to go on, I haven't actually spoken much about my photography. So I wanted to start doing more of that. So I first got into photography through a module that I did at college. I studied media production at college, which was basically video production, making videos, and initially I wanted to do video editing, but I was made to do an extra module, which basically ended up being photography, and through that I ended up realising I had a love for photography, and so I got more and more interested in it through that, and eventually ended up buying myself a camera because I realised I enjoyed it so much. And initially, when I was sort of playing about with photography and things, I sort of realised, because I had such a big passion at the same time for motorsport, especially Formula 1, I'm a big Formula 1 fan. So initially I wanted to get into motorsport photography because I developed this love for photography, and also had this love for motorsport as well, so it made sense to me to put those two together. So I wanted to do motorsport photography. I'll probably get into reasons in another video as to why that changed, but when I was still living back home in Carlisle, I'd booked a trip back in 2011. I booked a trip to go to South Korea because I had a friend there at the time who was teaching English there, and I coincided this with there was a Grand Prix race in South Korea at the time, so I timed it so that I could visit the Grand Prix at the same time. So I had my camera. I'd never travelled anywhere outside of my hometown. I'd never travelled outside of my hometown with the camera, but I guess my main focus was photographing the Formula 1 in South Korea, because like I said, I was more interested in motorsports at the time. But obviously, because I had my camera with me, obviously I wanted to take photos of Seoul, South Korea as well. So I bought this book. It's the Lonely Planet's Guide to Travel Photography, because I had never done travel photography before. Obviously wanted to get some tips, and this book covers a lot of things. It's all sort of basics. It'll go into equipment and different types of travel photography, like landscapes, cityscapes, wildlife. It covers deserts, rainforests, snow, ice, portraits. It covers a lot of things. So I kind of read that cover to cover. So I got to South Korea, and it was a bit of a culture shock for me to begin with. I was walking around and I was pretty much the only white person, and none of the signs were in English. It was a whole different experience, which I found when I first got there, for like the first day or so, I found a bit daunting. And then as I started to go out and just wander around and explore, I actually loved it. I guess that's probably where I love for exploring new places and different cultures. I guess that's where it first started. So I took my camera out with me every day, just because I was excited to explore somewhere new. It was at the time I hadn't done much travelling, so it was exciting. Even then, I was still thinking about things like leading lines, depth of field. It wasn't just a case of seeing something and simply putting a camera in front of it and pressing the shutter. I've always been very deliberate about things and thought about how I was taking a photo. And I think that's very important for anyone starting out in photography, to carefully consider those things.
And some of that just came naturally to me, but also reading that book and learning about the basics of travel photography definitely helped too. Looking back at them now, I think my approach was somewhat different back then, and in some ways maybe even better. I took a lot more photos then, and now I only take a photo if I feel it's something that could potentially stand out and something that might look good on the wall. Whereas back then I was just experimenting and trying everything. But as I guess all photographers do when they're just starting out and learning, experimenting and having fun. And now if I went to a temple, for example, I know I'd only take a photo if the light was really nice, there was no crowd of tourists, and I could perfectly represent the essence or beauty of the place in a nice way. But back then I would photograph it from every angle. I'd take wide shots, I'd get in close and photograph the details, I'd get real low and try different perspectives. But you will find that change as you develop as a photographer. I mean, back then I was just seeing what works and what doesn't, and trying to find myself as a photographer. And yeah, that's just something that comes with continuing to do it more and more. So because I have a better understanding of who I am and who I want to be as a photographer, I don't take photos of people selling food in markets or just those general things that sort of sum up the place for people. I know now that I want to take big, grand, beautiful and colourful landscapes and cityscapes that make you wish that you were there in that moment. Now I do enjoy street photography as well, obviously, so I do still like to document everyday life, but even that is about trying to take unique photos that stand out, and that's an area where I'm particularly drawn to colours. You know, it's not just simply showing a typical scene. I'm trying to create something artistic there as well. Now there's nothing at all wrong with photographing all the details of a place and showing general stuff like markets and the food and all the stuff that give a feel for the place. If you were taking photos for a travel blog, for example, you would need photos like that. So if that's what you want to do, then that's good, and do it. I just realised personally over time that wasn't the kind of photography that I wanted to do, and wasn't what I was naturally drawn to so much. But again, you find that out over time with experience. You know, when you're starting out, begin by trying everything and experimenting, and then over time, the more you do it, you'll just naturally notice your own style begin to come out.
So that was back in 2011. It was some time ago now, and it was my first ever attempt at travel photography, and you know, I still look back at those photos now, and I'm still very happy with some of them, despite the fact it was my first ever attempt. I mean, I've actually still got a couple of those photos still like in my portfolio now on my website. My friend at the time was staying in an apartment block, which you could get out onto the roof from, which offered a pretty nice view of Seoul and the river. So I went up there one night as the sun was setting, and I took many photos. I took a lot of long exposures, and I took this one after the sun had went down, in particular, which I particularly like even now. I've still got that on my website. You know, I got back home, and still at the time I wanted to pursue motorsport photography. I'll get into why that changed in a future video soon, because that's another story as well. So yeah, so although I wanted to still, motorsport was my main passion, that trip to South Korea just gave me that first little taste for travelling and travel and street photography as well. So yeah, I just wanted to give you all a sense of where it all started for me, really. Like I said, it was 2011. I'd only just recently gotten a new camera after only just sort of realising I had a love for photography after being made to study it at college. And again, this whole thing with how I got into it at college, that's a whole interesting story in itself as well, so I'll save that for a future video. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed seeing some of my early attempts at travel photography. If anyone is new to it or thinking about trying it, I would recommend this book, The Lonely Planet's Guide to Travel Photography. It is pretty in depth. Like I've said, it covers basically everything related to travel photography. I've wrote in blog posts before as well about the importance of considering everything in the frame, thinking about the photo before you press the shutter and things like that. And yeah, I think this book for me really did start getting me to do that from day one really. And apologies if I look quite hot and sweaty in this video. It's a pretty hot day today, and coming from the north of England, I'm still not used to hot weather, so yeah.